So I just wanted to take a moment and let all the listeners know. I want to say thank you. Thank you. We did a podcast. We've done a couple of webinars, actually, I think, and talking about measuring, how you measure up, if you will. How do you measure properties when you're out in the field? And we did a podcast. We had Hamp on a webinar talking about changes coming. Change is coming. Get ready. Ready. And I'd like to thank all of the appraisers and other folks out there that got involved and submitted some comments. What in the heck am I talking about? We're going to dive right into it in just a minute. Stay tuned. Hi, this is Bryan Reynolds, your host. You're listening to the Appraisal Update Podcast, brought to you by the fine folks of Appraiser eLearning. I'm glad you're here. We got lots to talk about, lots of exciting stuff. I don't know. Some of it might not be exciting. Some of it might be scary. I'm not scared. I'm optimistic, I think. But I got a couple of guests with me, and I'm glad they're here to kind of make an announcement to you folks. And so, Mr. John Dingeman, what are you these days? Chief Appraiser, just troublemaker. But other than that, Chief Appraiser at Class Valuation. Did I get that right?
You did.
Hey, man, I'm pretty good. And Mr. Hamp Thomas, I've branded him as Mr. ANSI. Hamp, how are you doing? Glad you're here, brother.
Hello, I'm good. Glad to be here.
Good. Well, thank you both for taking, this was a struggle, by the way, and it wasn't a struggle for you two. I mean, you froze on my screen. I went away and y'all kept partying without me, I think, something along those lines. But I look back and man, I was doing the introduction and Hamp had his eyes closed and he was all leaned back in that chair. And I'm like, oh my God, I must be doing great because Hamp's really just taking all this in. I mean, it's like he had his eyes closed. It was just really taking it in. And then when I saw John not moving, I thought, something's not right. John doesn't sit still. John's not taking it. John's froze. Oh my God, Hamp's not taking it in. He's froze too. So we had to do a quick reboot. And we may have some people actually watching, not live, but hi, if you're watching, we're recording this session and we're gonna boost it out on a video stream as well. So this is a podcast. It's the Appraisal Update Podcast that we do on a regular basis. And so for the most part, this will be audio fed and in podcast land, wherever you listen to this, guys. But we thought we would go ahead and keep the video, which we don't normally do, but we're going to keep the video this time and maybe boost it out on some social media and other sites because this is important. This is important what we're talking about right now. And we want all the folks out there in audio land as well as video land to be aware of what's happening. So thank you guys for both being here. And before we dive into the big announcement of what we want everyone to be aware of, let's just dive into a little bit of what ANSI is, why we, at least the three of us, we may be a minority out there, but why the three of us think that it's kind of an important thing, and then the big news. So Hamp, Mr. ANSI, if you will, if you don't mind to kind of give us a real brief summary of what exactly is ANSI Z765.
ANSI is the name.
There you go.
Doesn't matter who you ask, whether it's an agent, appraiser, a homeowner, it's the name everybody knows. So if you want to, it's a smart business idea to use the name that everybody knows. That's simple.
Okay. And what is it? It's a standard, obviously, but tell our viewers or listeners what exactly is ANSI, in case somebody doesn't know.
Yeah, well, ANSI makes standards for all kinds of things. The Z765 is the residential measurement standard. Okay. It's only one state mandates it, but if we want to look more professional, we need to use a standard. ANSI's the name.
Okay. All right. And John, why do you think it's important that appraisers use this standard or familiarize themselves with it and et cetera, et cetera?
I think it's to their benefit, Brian. I mean, following a recognized standard, you're putting a legal document out there with your signature on it, something to stand behind. You know, I always look at whenever there's standards or guidelines, it's somebody else that said something. So if you don't like the way I measured your house, you don't like the fact that I didn't include that accessory dwelling unit detached from the main dwelling into the GLA, well, I didn't write the standards. ANSI wrote the standards. I'm just following them.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I'm basing it on a recognized standard, right? Not something I'm just making up. I'm going to share here real quick, and those that are listening and not viewing, I'll tell you where that you can find this. So it's in a little document called USPAP. It's our Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice. And for those non-appraisers listening right now, that's really kind of our, I don't want to call it a Bible per se, but it is our minimum, our bare bone minimum requirements of how we behave as with our appraiser hat on, right? Our standards of practice, our ethical obligations. And there's a question in there, and I have my digital copy of USPAP up on the screen for those that might be watching us. For those of you not watching us, pull out your trusted 2020-2021 edition of USPAP and go to frequently asked question number 181, and that's on page 264. All right. And the question that's asked, it's referring to measuring single family residences using the ANSI standard. And it says, are appraisers bound by USPAP required to comply with ANSI Z75, presently 2013, the standard method for measuring square footage in detached and attached single family residences? And the answer, according to the Appraisal Foundation, is no. Appraisers aren't required to comply. All right. Now, I do want to just premise this and say, if you're in the Commonwealth of Kentucky, there is a requirement that we have to adhere to that. So when USPAP and law bumps heads, law wins, right? So we have to go over and beyond what USPAP says in Kentucky. We have to adhere to that. But look at all of the space, and if you can't look, let me describe it to you. There's 2 paragraphs to say no. So it really says a lot more than no, doesn't it? I'm not going to read all this to you. You can look at FAQ 181 in your publication, USPAP, your copy. What it basically says in a nutshell is appraisers shouldn't mess up when it comes to your due diligence, right? You shouldn't be careless or negligent when providing appraisal services. And the very last sentence, I will read that. It says, appraisers must use due diligence and due care in performing appraisal services, including gathering factual data such as square footage. So that's pretty clear. I mean, they say no, but man, they take a lot of black and white space there to say no, don't they? So they say a little more than no. So as Hamp said, ANSI, they set a lot of standards, but the one we're talking about, Z765, is the standard for measuring houses. Is that fair?
That's fair. There's in there, Bryan, though, that is it's, and I've lost my train of thought, that it's something, though, that you are, if you're going to do a good job, you need something you can hold in your hand and say, this is how I did it. If you had to go to court or you have a problem with anybody, somebody else can at least take that document and say, this is how I did it, and come up with something really close to what you came up with.
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, I've asked appraisers all across the country for many, many years, where do you start your tape measure on a story and a half, right? The house, and I know John, Mr. AMC Chief Appraiser, don't yell at me for using a UAD protocol here. You know, I know a story and a half is not an architectural style. I got it. But it's a story and a half, for crying out loud. All right. So I ask appraisers across the country, where do you start your tape when you're on that second floor, the second level of a story and a half home? Where do you start your tape? And I know both of you guys have taught ANSI over the years in various parts of the country. But I hear a lot, well, where my shoulder hits or my head hits or my hip or baseboard to baseboard, paint to paint. My favorite of all time, I don't know, I've had a lot of favorites. One was as if I was sitting in a chair where my head would hit the slope. That's where I start. And I'm like, dude, wait a minute. You carry it? I'm sounding like Bobby Chris. Dude, I say, wait a minute. You carry a chair around with you on your inspections? I know some appraisers carry ladders. You carry chairs to set in to see where your head would hit the slope, and then you start. But my favorite of all time, and I swear, I think I was in Kansas City. No, it's not. Hamp's holding his shoulder there. Well, I hear that's probably the most that I hear. Shoulder. Walk up where my shoulder hits. I do. I heard that in class just the other day in Nashville. My shoulder. And then she did say, my shoulder's 5 foot. She did say that. But I hear head a lot. And this is my favorite of all time. I walk up to where this guy said this with a straight face too. I walk up to where my head hits that slope and I take a step back. And that's where I'm like, you take a step back. Well, how far of a step back do you take? You know? So like Hamp was just saying, I like to be able to hold something up and say, well, this is what I base my calculation on, right? And so I'm going to hold this document up that says the American National Standard for Single-Family Residential Buildings, square footage method for calculating. Now, the most recent one, as of right this second, as of this broadcast, is 2013. And I like to be able to hold this up and say, well, this is where I got mine. So whether you use it or not, that's a business decision. Mr. ANSI here is on a quest to get, Hamp, you tell it, is it fair to say you're on a quest to get everybody on the same page with how to calculate square footage?
My original quest was ANSI 2020. I don't know if I'm going to make 2020, but I'm going to keep working on it. But to me, if appraisers and agents, if everybody wants to be professional and, you know, we're the square footage, the real estate experts, and I say consumers deserve to know the true size of their house, and you got to have a standard to measure it by, so it's the same in whether it's Nashville or, you know, California, wherever, North Carolina, it all needs to be the same. And
wouldn't it be really cool if, regardless of the appraiser that came out, or real estate agent, if we could get them involved, right? Wouldn't it be, regardless of who came out, if they knew how to measure and they measured correctly, and we had some sort of blueprint, I get it, blueprint, if we had some sort of model, that really did just come off my tongue. If we had some sort of model that we all tried to adhere to, it would make us, you know, pretty consistent, wouldn't it?
And even like in MLS, you know, you got 50 different names for finished square footage. If we could all talk in one language, you know, and ANSI does say you're supposed to call it, you're doing a statement of finished square footage and you're counting finished living areas, not GLA.
Right, right. John, and I know neither one of you know what I'm going to ask you because these aren't scripted. Y'all have met me, right? So again, I reminded our listeners in our last podcast that these aren't rehearsed. They're not scripted. No one knows what we're going to, I don't even know what we're going to talk about until we talk about it. But John, Julie Jones showed me this fancy 3D scanning stuff y'all got. And I think you actually originally showed it to me, gosh, seems like maybe a couple of years ago, 3 years ago. But then you told me I couldn't tell anybody and I couldn't talk about it. And I'm like, come on, this is cool stuff. But now you guys are talking about it. Maybe it was something different. I don't know. But anyway, Julie was talking about her 3D scanning stuff, right? But I assume the programmers could program that to measure in accordance to a national standard.
Sure. So we invested in the technology. The organization certainly looks at what appraisers doing and what standards are we following, and making sure that their measurements are aligned. So they're taking exterior measurements to measure square footage, gross living area.
Right, right.
And it's remarkable just how accurate the scanning is.
Yeah,
and the things that it picks up.
I want to get one of those. I mean, nobody has sent me a surprise package in the mail yet, so I guess I need to. I mean, I got an Amazon package today. I've got like 5 Amazon stuff coming. I went crazy with this. I'm ordering stuff all the time. But anyway, yeah, I haven't gotten a package from you or Julie, so I guess I'm going to have to just break down and buy one.
I'm sure it will come soon.
It's in the mail. Is that what you're saying? It's in the mail?
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'll continue to check my mailbox a couple of times a day and see. But let's talk about why I wanted to corral you two guys in and spend a couple of moments with me today. In ANSI, there is a protocol that periodically it's reviewed, right? It was most recently reviewed. Obviously, it was updated in 2013. In 2011, a consensus committee considered changes to the 2003 edition, and they reaffirmed the 2003 edition. So they met in 2011. I'm guessing they met in 2013 because that is the most recent revision, right? Well, guess what? They've met for 2020. And there actually has been some proposed changes. And while we're not going to get into all of those in this short broadcast, we want to give the listener some insight on where they can find the proposed changes. And really, more importantly, a big announcement that there is a meeting that's going to take place on July 22nd. Now, depending on when we air this broadcast, and our podcasts normally come out on Tuesdays. So it's likely that you're listening to this podcast on Tuesday, July 21st. Maybe we'll release this little video a day or so before that, if possible. But it's highly probable that many of you may be listening to this broadcast the first time on July the 21st, which is Tuesday. And that means that the public meeting, or the meeting that will be open to the public, let me put it that way, is going to occur tomorrow, or whenever you listen to this, it's going to occur on July 22nd. And so we don't know exactly what that means, but we do know that it means there's a meeting on July 22nd and it's open to the public. So, John, what are your thoughts? Would you encourage the public, people that are listening to this broadcast or viewing this broadcast, would you encourage them to take a moment of their time to try to view or participate in that public meeting?
I would absolutely encourage them to, right? So start now. If you didn't in the past, that's fine, but start now. Your involvement's important to our profession and our industry.
Yeah, and I started this broadcast by thanking appraisers, and I've put the link up. If you're watching, there's a link here. If not, I'm going to direct Ben to when he sends this out in the way of a podcast to make sure that the link is available so you guys listening can click. All right. You can Google ANSI Z765 2020, and you can probably find it that way. It's homeinnovation.com is the website, and then just get on there and start searching ANSI, and you'll find some stuff. You'll see all the public comments. But I started this out by thanking appraisers and others, interested parties. There were 44 public comments. And I know Hamp, that is in the broadcast seat right now, he wrote a letter. And so, Hamp, I'll let you kind of summarize your letter to the listeners here in just a moment. The NAA wrote a letter. The National Association of Appraisers wrote a letter. Thank you, NAA, for writing a letter. But we had tons of just boots on the ground appraisers take their time to get involved and write comments to this consensus committee. And I'd like to personally thank all of those folks that got involved and wrote a letter, wrote an email, trying to make a difference in your profession. Guys, this is what we need to do on every potential change. On every potential change that impacts you as a practicing appraiser, get involved. Now, I don't know if it's going to make a hill of beans difference that the letter that Hamp wrote, or the letter that NAA wrote, or all these individual appraisers that got involved. I pray that it does. because myself and one other person were the only two that voted no to one of these major changes that we're not crazy about. So without further holding this up, Hamp, if you don't mind, can you take a couple of moments, and I'm not going to keep you guys here much longer. The intent of this broadcast is to let our listeners and maybe viewers in this case know that there is a meeting that is occurring on July 22nd. I don't know the time. There's a button there for you to email, and it says interested parties. It's open to the public, and interested parties may request the meeting credentials by sending an email to standards@homeinnovation.com. So if you're listening, send an email to standards@homeinnovation.com. Say, I would like to be a member of the public attending this meeting. So Hamp, what did your letter to this committee say? In a nutshell, what did you say, and what were you really kind of wanting to shake them up and get their attention about?
And it was really about the main change that I see anyway in this 2020 edition. And first off, 44 people that took the time to send in letters. That's pretty awesome. But this stuff affects all of us. You know, it changes what we do from day to day. And the letter I sent and the comments that you made were really about the change in measuring rooms with sloped ceilings. And the debate has always been, do we add for both exterior walls or do we add for none? And in the 2020 ANSI edition is going to give us a third option that says we're only going to add for one exterior wall. And I'm saying that's going to make it even more confusing, and let's stick with either add for none or both. Yeah. John, give us some insight. You're a chief appraiser with an AMC, but you're an appraiser, and you were out in the field for many, many years. Your bride is an appraiser as well. She was out in the field for many, many years. When you were out in the field, you were measuring homes that were, let's say, Cape Cod. There you go. I'm UAD compliant now, right? It's a Cape Cod. But when you get to that second level, that of the story and a half Cape Cod, and you start your tape measure, to tell everybody how you did it.
Well, a tape measure is one way, but 5 feet up to the wall, wherever that wall is, then imagine a paint surface, right? Drywall or something, and measure paint to paint.
Okay. So you're measuring paint to paint. And yeah, I said tape measure. I actually have a disto. You'll be proud of me, Hamp. I got a disto. And you know, the other day, this is cool when it happens. I have my trainee with me, and I walk up and I put that disto, because it's a slope ceiling. I got to start at the 5 foot mark. And so I put that disto up and I hit it, boom. And it said 5 feet. I said, look at there. Look at there. I said, put your finger there and don't move it, because I'm going to go to the other wall and start at the 5 foot mark too, right? And sometimes what you can do if you're there by yourself, you're not, you know, you can measure the distance from there and say, oh, okay, well, it's a foot out from the wall to the 5 foot mark. And then you could shoot across and say, okay, I got to take a foot off this side, a foot off that side, or whatever it is, right? But I had her there. So I said, put your finger there, don't move. And then I went over to the other side. And of course, I didn't tell her I had to shoot it. I'm at 4 feet 10. Oh, crap. I got to move up a little. Okay, there's 5 foot. And I put my laser there, and I shoot over there at her finger, or next to her finger. And that's my dimension. So, John, am I hearing that's the dimension you take? You do not add for the thickness of an outside wall, right? You're taking whatever that interior measurement is, and boom, that's what you use.
Correct.
Okay. That's what I do too. Hamp, what about you? Are you adding thickness of the wall or not?
I mean, we've always, whenever we've always taught that you do it just like the condo, you know, paint to paint. And the way that I read that sketch in the 2013 edition, the dotted lines for finished space are on the inside of that sketch. So
yeah, and so I agree. You know, we as appraisers, I call us analysts, because we're analyzing the actions of market participants, right? So an appraiser is also an analyst. And we have a tendency to overanalyze.
No.
Appraisers, quit overanalyzing. Keep it simple, right? But the other coin or the other side of the coin or other argument, however you want to say that, is, well, the rest of the standard talks about using outside measurements. So that's, in my mind, I'm going to add thickness for a hypothetical wall, et cetera, et cetera. And a lot of appraisers apparently do it that way. I taught a USPAP class this morning. We had 27 students virtually, which is cool. We had them from all over the country. I had them from California, Florida, Tennessee, Virginia, Mississippi, Texas, Ohio, Washington State, Georgia, Michigan, Louisiana, and Arizona. That's my list of where all these different appraisers were from. And so it was kind of cool that I was able to ask them from different geographic areas, how do you do it? How do you do it? And we had several that said they had for that thickness of the wall. We had several that didn't. So that is a little confusing, and we could use, hey, if anybody's listening out there in ANSI land, we could use a little clarity on that. But the proposed change is what, Hamp? What is the proposed change?
Yeah, instead of either or, the proposed change is you're going to measure from 5 foot to 5 foot on the slope wall and add 1 exterior dimension.
Okay, so let me make sure I understand this right. And I think that's what they're proposing here. So let me make sure I understand this right. Instead of paint to paint, how John, Hamp, and Bryan does it, instead of adding thickness for both sides of the measurement like many other appraisers do, they're going to kind of split the difference, right? If we can't agree, let's just split the difference. Let's start at the 5 foot mark on one side, go to the other side, and add the thickness for that. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. And most people, truthfully, everybody we talk to, they don't really care. You know, as long as we all do it the same way. That's the whole point.
Right. Yeah, I think that's fair, Hamp. I think you're right. I think a lot of folks have said, let's just do it one way or the other, but don't do half and half. And I don't think they're trying to be silly or trying to say, let's divide it into, like I kind of poked fun at. The rationale, from my understanding, is that you have to have a fire stop. And I don't know if this is in a particular jurisdiction or if I'm not a construction guy. So I tip my hat to them. They're the experts in that regard, how to build a house, right? But my understanding is you got to have a fire stop, and in some jurisdictions, or maybe all jurisdictions, I don't know, they say you got to have a fire stop, you got to have insulation, you got to have an exterior wall surface on there. So for all practical purposes, it's an outside wall. At least that's the rationale that I think I heard. And but my point is, it's not an outside wall. You stick your fist through that wall. Are you outside or are you in the attic? I mean, you're in the attic, for crying out loud. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. I do want to, again, thank the 44 public comments that occurred. That is awesome. And I want to just let folks know that there's a meeting July 22nd. You ought to jump on there if you can.
See, you're going to be able to talk, but it would be good to have a showing.
Hey, you got your little helper there. Awesome. You don't have to scoot him out. That's the wonderful thing about a live broadcast. You never know what's going to happen. You know?
But anyway, it's good to have a showing of people there to let them know that we're interested in this stuff.
Absolutely, yeah. And as Hamp said, and his little helper back there, he's fine, Hamp. I love it. You know, even if you can't talk, which is hard for John Dingeman.
I'm doing a good job right now, man.
If you can't talk, if you got to just sit there and kind of, you know, the period for public comment's over. I mean, it's over. So I don't know if they'll let anybody talk or type, or, you know, I really don't know what's going to happen. But there is on their website, on the link that you see on the screen if you're watching. And again, we'll have Ben share that for all the podcast listeners. That you can hopefully click on this link, because it's a long link. It'd be forever to tell you what that is, but it is. It says about home innovation news, and it says the ANSI Z765 2020 update consensus committee meeting is open to the public, and I thank them for that. That is a cool thing that they're allowing the transparency and allowing the public to participate, even if they really can't participate, that public comment. You know, there are rules and things you have to go through. So maybe your time this time is over for your comment session, but at least you can be a fly on the wall and see, and who knows, maybe they'll do comments. I don't know one way or the other, but the whole purpose, number one, is to let the listeners know that this is occurring July 22nd. We'd love for you to participate in it. Number two, we want to thank all of the 44 folks that wrote letters and got involved. Thank you so much for doing that. And then number three, please get involved. If you haven't already, join an association, write a letter, get involved, know what's happening in your world, because you really, really, really can make a difference. And we, the three of us at least, hope that these 44 comments make a difference. I don't know if it will or not. John?
Something on Facebook, write a letter to do something really positive there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And attend anyways. I mean, I know, you said, Brian, that people might not be able to comment. We obviously, we're only speculating, right?
Sure.
There's value, number one, in being informed, right? So in addition to that, there's value in understanding the process. So maybe next time you can be involved. But being informed, that's not a bad thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, if somebody listening right now, Hamp wants to reach out to you, you're Mr. ANSI. You're always developing new courses, and we appreciate that at Appraiser eLearning. We've got lots of your courses on Appraiser eLearning, and soon to be, if not already, on Agent eLearning. That's big news. That's very cool as well. But if somebody wanted to reach out and talk to you or pick your brain directly, right? What would be the best way to somebody say, hey, Hamp, I want to talk to you about maybe starting a measuring service or something like that? How could they reach out to you and talk to you?
Easiest way to get me is pinehurstappraiser@gmail.com.
Very good, very good. And Mr. Dingeman, nobody wants to talk to you. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. If someone wants to reach out to you, whether it be wanting you to get on the class valuation panel, whether they want to just talk to you about appraising, if they want to talk to you about the NAA, which I know you're a proud member and advocate for, how can they reach out to John?
They can email me at jDingeman@classvaluation.com, or they can call my cell 480-209-9636. I'm always here to help.
Wow, gave his cell phone out. So yeah, y'all call him and bug him. No, John's a good guy. He likes to talk about appraisal work. He'll call me out of the blue sometimes, and a 5-minute conversation will be, what, John, 2 hours? It's not always.
But I'm just returning your call anyways, man.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. So anyway, I appreciate these two guys a whole lot, and really I appreciate them right now because we had some technical difficulties early. I had some technical difficulties. Ben Max was not here to hold my hand, and I bounced off, and Hamp fell asleep or was closing his eyes, taking it in, and then John froze, and it all happened. So anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. And hey, I'm going to give more statistics later, but I just found out that this podcast has had over 29,000 downloads. So somebody's listening, or John keeps just downloading me over and over and over. I'm not sure which, but thank you for listening, guys. We really appreciate it. It's our way to give back to the appraisal profession. We do the podcast. We try to do those about once a week. We do the appraisal report webinar, which will be coming up. I've got a really great guest coming up, a female appraiser out of Atlanta, and I'm going to just call her my celebrity appraiser. She's not a celebrity, but she appraises celebrity homes. So that's kind of cool. I think it'll be an interesting topic, and that's coming up on the fourth Thursday of this month, which is July 23rd. So please be sure you tune in for that as well. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been listening to the Appraisal Update Podcast, brought to you by Appraiser eLearning. Some of you have been watching us on a little video stream, so thanks for watching us. For Hamp Thomas, John Damon, and I'm Bryan Reynolds, your host. Have a great evening, and thank you for listening.
Be safe.